It happened on a humid Tuesday afternoon outside the quiet town of Westfall. I was on my way back from visiting an old friend, just a 2-hour drive from the coast. My name's Henry L. Morris, but nobody's called me that in years, except maybe the VA doctors. I was driving an old Lincoln Continental, the kind with steel bones and a trunk big enough to hold 2 tool chests and a bag of groceries. I kept to myself mostly. Wore my cap low and didn't talk unless I had something worth saying. But that day, I was 15 miles out from home when the blue lights lit up behind me. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe a taillight, maybe a random check. I pulled over slow and easy. 2 patrol cars, both young officers. One looked tense before he even got out of his cruiser. "License and registration," the first officer said, not even making eye contact. I reached slowly for the glove box, but before I could even open it, the second cop yanked open my door. Out of the car, he barked. "Son, there's no need," I started, but he grabbed my arm and pulled hard. My shoulder screamed in protest. I was 78, not made of stone. The bystanders, folks from a nearby gas station, began to gather. A woman started filming on her phone. I saw her eyebrows knit together in confusion, then concern. The officers hadn't asked a single question. Just dragged me out like I was some threat. I didn't resist. Never had to. But then, someone in the crowd gasped. "Wait a minute. Is that?" Another voice, shaky, followed, "No way. That's him." The officers hadn't noticed yet. But the people were beginning to whisper. The energy shifted. They were starting to recognize me. The first officer was still barking orders, trying to shove me toward the hood of my own car. I winced as his grip tightened around my wrist. The second one hovered behind him, hand on his belt, watching the growing crowd like they were the problem. That's when the woman with the phone stepped forward. She didn't yell. She didn't curse. She just said one sentence that stopped everything cold. "Do you even know who that is?" The officer scoffed. "Ma'am, step back or you'll be detained." But she didn't move. She just held her phone up higher. "That man's name is Henry Morris. Colonel Henry Morris. U.S. Army, retired. 2 silver stars. You're manhandling a decorated veteran, and you're being recorded." The second officer blinked. His hand dropped from his belt. "No way," he muttered. More murmurs now. A man near the gas pumps called out, he led the Ridgewell rescue mission in '93. "That's him. I saw it on the news when I was a kid." The cop holding me paused. His hand loosened. For the first time, he looked me straight in the eye. "Wait. You're—" I didn't answer right away. I was staring past him at the little girl who'd stepped out of her family's car, clutching a folded flag. She tugged her father's sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, he looks like Grandpa's photo." I took a slow breath. My voice came out gravelly but calm. "Colonel Henry Morris, serial number 0632-019, retired. And unless the laws have changed since this morning, I believe I still have the right to open my own glove box without being thrown out of my vehicle." The first officer backed away like he'd been burned. The second looked sick. But it was already too late. People weren't just watching. They were filming, calling, posting. The story was already spreading. And it was only just beginning. The moment the second officer stepped back, I adjusted my jacket and straightened up. My knees ached, but I stood tall. A few decades ago, I commanded entire battalions overseas. That discipline never really leaves you. "Sir." The first officer began, his voice suddenly unsure. "Save it," I said calmly. "You didn't ask a single question. You saw an old man in an old car and decided I was trouble. That's the kind of judgment that gets people hurt, or worse." He looked down, but it was clear the damage was done. The gas station owner, a burly man in his 40s, stepped out from behind the counter and pointed at the patrol car. "You boys might want to call your supervisor. This ain't going away quietly." The woman filming added, "This video's already online. My cousin works at Channel 6. I sent it to her." A car door slammed. A young paramedic who'd been filling up an ambulance nearby jogged over. "Colonel Morris?" he asked breathlessly. "My uncle served under you. Said you saved his squad in Fallujah. Sir, are you okay?" I nodded. "Nothing that won't heal." Then something strange happened. People started approaching me, not with questions, but with thanks. A retired postal worker. A schoolteacher. Even a teenage boy who said he'd read about me in a school project on military leadership. The two officers just stood there, looking like they wanted the pavement to swallow them whole. A third cruiser pulled up fast, lights flashing. Out stepped a sergeant. He took one look at the scene, at me, at the crowd, at the phones, and his face went pale. "Colonel Morris," he said with a respectful nod, "I deeply apologize." These two, clearly didn't know who they were dealing with. I held his gaze. "That's the problem, Sergeant. It shouldn't matter who I am." The silence that followed was heavy. Because everyone there knew I was right. The sergeant turned to the younger officers, his voice low and sharp. "You two, in the cruiser. Now." They hesitated for half a second, until they saw the look in his eyes. Without another word, they walked back to their car, heads down. The doors slammed shut like the end of a bad chapter. The sergeant faced me again. "Sir, I don't have the words. I'll be filing a full incident report and notifying internal affairs. You have my word, this won't get buried." I gave a slight nod. "It's not just about me. I'm not the first they've done this to. I just happen to have a few medals and a history they didn't bother checking." He swallowed hard. "Understood." Behind him, the crowd had grown. People had gathered from nearby businesses. Phones were still rolling. But the energy had changed. No longer just anger or disbelief, it was respect, and something deeper. One man came forward. A middle-aged mechanic in a grease-stained shirt. "Sir," he said, "if there's anything you need, anything, just say the word." I looked around at all of them. Ordinary people, standing up because they knew something wrong had just happened. And for once, it wasn't going to be swept aside. "I need one thing," I said. "Tell the truth. Don't let them rewrite this." The woman with the phone raised her hand. "It's already trending. You're not just a name anymore, Colonel. You're the story." I didn't want to be a symbol. I never asked for attention. But maybe, just maybe, this was the kind of wake-up call the town needed. Sirens wailed in the distance. News vans were on the way. And I had a feeling this was only the beginning. Minutes later, a sleek black SUV pulled up behind the news vans. No lights. No logos. Just tinted windows and a quiet hum. From the passenger side, a tall man in a dark suit stepped out, talking into a phone and scanning the scene like he already knew what had happened. He made a beeline toward me. "Colonel Morris?" he asked. "Special Agent Ryan Whitmore, Office of the Secretary of Defense." That quieted the entire block. The sergeant straightened up. The reporters froze. Even the gawkers put their phones down for a moment. Agent Whitmore extended a hand. The secretary asked me to deliver his personal regards. He saw the footage. He nodded toward the nearest phone still filming. "And he's not happy." I raised an eyebrow. Didn't think I warranted attention from that high up anymore. "You do today," the agent said. "And not just because of your service. What happened here is going to be reviewed at multiple levels. There's already a directive coming down for law enforcement accountability training, nationally. I blinked. Because of this? He nodded. Because it's not just about the officers who pulled you from the car. It's about what the system let them believe they could get away with. That ends now. The crowd murmured in disbelief. Agent Whitmore turned slightly, addressing the sergeant without even raising his voice. These officers will be placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Colonel Morris has full legal support if he chooses to pursue action. And believe me, Washington is watching closely. The sergeant gave a slow, sober nod. Then Agent Whitmore leaned closer to me, dropping his voice. There's one more thing. Arlington wants to host a recognition event for you, quiet, dignified. Your records were never made public, and the secretary thinks it's time we correct that. I looked away for a moment, jaw tight. I didn't do any of it for medals. We know, he said. That's why it matters more. For the first time that day, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. Just slightly. I hadn't asked for this. But if my name being dragged into the spotlight could help the next man who got profiled or pulled from a car, then maybe it was worth it. The crowd had quieted. Not out of fear, out of respect. Agent Whitmore stepped back, giving me space, but I could feel the weight of every eye on me. I hated attention. Always had. But today wasn't about comfort. One of the younger reporters approached, holding a mic, clearly nervous. Colonel Morris, can I ask, why haven't we heard your name before? I mean, Fallujah. Ridgewell, even I've read about those missions, but your name was never attached. I looked at her. Young, honest. The kind of person who still believed in the truth. That's because I asked them not to, I said. Back then, I wanted the team recognized, not the man giving the orders. A name in the papers doesn't bring your soldiers home. Quiet service was enough for me. She hesitated. And now? I glanced over at the two officers still sitting in the back of their cruiser, pale and silent. Now, I said carefully, quiet's not enough. Not anymore. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Then a familiar voice called out from the back. Colonel Morris. Heads turned as an elderly man stepped forward, cane in hand. His jacket was wrinkled, but the pins on it gleamed in the sunlight. I blinked. Sergeant Franklin. I said. He smiled. You still remember. How could I forget? You dragged me out of that convoy in '03 with a broken leg and 3 enemy drones overhead. He laughed. Still got shrapnel in my knee for that one. But you're the one who signed the medal paperwork for me. I figured today I'd return the favor. From his jacket pocket, he pulled something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing a polished bronze star with a red, white and blue ribbon. My eyes narrowed. Frank, that's not yours to give. No, he said. But it's the one they should have given you. The one they never did. So now, we're doing it our way. He held it out with both hands. And for a long moment, I didn't move. But the silence was deep. The cameras were rolling. The town was watching. And this time, I accepted it. Not for me. For everyone who never got the recognition they earned, and for everyone still waiting for justice. As I pinned the medal to my chest, the wind stirred, gentle, but heavy with meaning. People began to applaud. Not the loud, hollow kind meant for cameras. It was quiet, steady. Real. The officer who'd grabbed me earlier was still in the back seat of the cruiser. He watched the scene unfold with a blank, stunned expression, like he was finally realizing what he'd done. What he'd almost erased. And maybe that was the point. This wasn't just about what they did to me. It was about what gets overlooked every day, until someone decides to stand still long enough to witness it. The mechanic stepped forward again, wiping his hands with a rag. "Colonel," he said, "if you ever need a tune-up, it's on the house. For life." A teenager raised her hand, shy. "Do you speak at schools? My class would flip if you came by." Before I could answer, a woman in scrubs, nurse, maybe, asked, "Are you okay to get home?" I could follow behind, just to be safe. I smiled. I appreciate it. But I've been driving myself for 60 years. I'll be just fine. Still, the offers kept coming. Kindness pouring out of strangers who, just an hour ago, had no idea who I was. The sergeant stepped back up, clipboard in hand. "Colonel Morris, for the record, will be filing a formal apology with the city council. The mayor's already aware." "If there's anything else, there is," I interrupted. "Don't just file paperwork. Fix the training. Talk to your people. You don't need to recognize medals, you just need to recognize humanity." He nodded. This time, solemnly. Agent Whitmore's phone buzzed again. He stepped away to take the call, but not before glancing over and giving me a firm, respectful nod. I knew what that meant. More eyes were on this than I'd imagined. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a ripple. And I could feel it spreading already. By nightfall, I was back home. Same old house. Same porch light flickering. But something felt different. Not because anything here had changed. Because out there, everything had. The story had gone national. I didn't need to turn on the TV to know, my phone was ringing non-stop. Reporters. Advocates. Old soldiers I hadn't heard from in decades. Even my granddaughter, who usually only texted emojis, had sent one message, "Grandpa, you broke the internet." I chuckled at that. But by morning, it had gone far beyond viral videos. Local departments across the state had launched internal reviews of traffic stop protocols. One sheriff's department even called it the Morris Mandate. Congressional aides reached out. A few asked if I'd testify. I didn't want politics. I wanted clarity. Accountability. Still, I agreed to speak, if only to remind them that this wasn't about me. Then came the real surprise. The defense secretary himself called. Not an assistant. Not a liaison. The man. His voice was respectful, composed. "Colonel Morris, the President would like to award you a citation for distinguished post-service impact." I hesitated. That sounds like politics dressed as gratitude. He paused. Maybe. But it's also a moment for the country to remember how many people like you disappear quietly, until they're dragged back into the spotlight, usually the wrong way. He wasn't wrong. But I wasn't ready to say yes. Instead, I said something else. "Don't just give me a medal. Give these officers someone to learn from. Let me speak to them. Let me be part of the solution, not a headline." He was quiet for a moment. Then said, "Consider it done." That night, sitting on the porch with the stars overhead and the quiet buzz of summer insects, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Purpose. Not from war. Not from rank. But from what came after. 2 weeks later, I stood inside the Westfall Police Department Training Center, wearing a pressed shirt, no medals, no uniform, just me. Across from me sat 30 officers. Some rookies, some seasoned. Some looked ashamed. Others looked curious. A few looked like they didn't know what to expect. I didn't come to scold. I came to teach. I began with a photo. "This is Private First Class Evan Knox," I said, holding up a faded snapshot of a young soldier in dusty fatigues. He froze when a child ran toward us carrying what looked like a toy. I barked at him to stand down. He didn't. He tackled the boy and saved all our lives. The room was silent. He never got a medal. Never made the news. But he saved lives because he saw a human before he saw a threat. I let the words hang in the air. That's the kind of vision you need out there. Not just eyes, vision. Because every person you stop, question, or protect is someone's son. Someone's mother. Someone's grandfather. I looked toward the two officers who had pulled me from my car. They sat in the back, not hiding, but not proud either. One of you asked why I didn't resist, I continued. It's because I've survived things most of you couldn't imagine. But what hurt that day wasn't the bruises. It was the assumption that I wasn't worth the benefit of the doubt. An older officer raised his hand. "Colonel, do you think people can change?" I nodded. Only if they're willing to admit they need to. After the session, the two young officers approached me. Neither spoke right away. Then the taller one finally said, "Sir. I was wrong. We were both wrong. And we're sorry." I studied them for a moment. Their uniforms looked heavy. Not because of fabric, because of growth. I extended my hand. "Don't just say sorry. Prove it. Every day." They both nodded. And I walked out, feeling the shift, not in the system yet, but in the minds that could change it. Weeks passed. Then months. The world, as it always does, moved on to the next headline, the next outrage, the next viral clip. But something had changed, not just in Westfall, not just in policy, but in people. The town invited me to speak at their Veterans Day ceremony. I almost declined, never liked being on stages, but this time, I felt it mattered. I stood beneath a newly raised flagpole in front of the courthouse. A plaque beneath it read, "In honor of Colonel Henry L. Morris, a soldier, a citizen, a reminder. Respect is not earned by rank. It is proven by how we treat those we don't understand." They unveiled it in front of a silent crowd. No cheers. No fireworks. Just stillness, and meaning. The same woman who had filmed that first encounter months ago approached me afterward. She smiled, phone in hand. "I haven't posted anything since that day," she said. "But I think I'm finally ready to share the last part." She showed me a new video. In it, the two officers stood before a classroom of young recruits, telling their story, not to excuse themselves, but to teach. To show how easily judgment clouds duty. How humility can repair what pride breaks. They mentioned my name, but not as a warning. As a turning point. I looked out at the town square, the faces, the generations, the children sitting on their parents' shoulders. I had spent my life serving in silence. But this, somehow, felt louder than any battlefield. This wasn't about revenge. Or punishment. Or glory. It was about remembrance. Not of what had been done to me. But of what we did after. And if that became my legacy, then it was worth every bruise.